In the spring of 1904, the city of St. Louis, Missouri became the center of the known universe. To celebrate the centennial of the Louisiana Purchase, the United States didn't just throw a party, they built a temporary civilization. Sprawling over 1,200 acres, nearly double the size of the famous 1893 Chicago Fair, the exposition featured over 1,500 buildings connected by 75 miles of roads and walkways. It was an era where the Victorian age was crashing into the modern industrial age. It was a place where you could see the latest X-ray technology in the morning and watch a reenactment of a Boer War battle in the afternoon. But beneath the glittering lights of the Ivory City lay a story of human endurance, scientific hubris, and a marathon race so chaotic it remains the strangest sporting event in history. Chapter 1. A Palace for Everything. The architecture of the fair was designed to leave visitors breathless. Using a material called staff, a mixture of plaster of Paris and hemp fiber, architects created massive, gleaming white palaces that looked like solid marble but were designed to be torn down after 7 months. The Palace of Agriculture. Covering 20 acres, it featured a 15-foot-high statue of King Vulcan made entirely of iron and a landscape of a farm made completely out of grains and seeds. The Palace of Electricity. At a time when most American homes still used kerosene lamps, this palace was a revelation. It was illuminated by thousands of incandescent bulbs, a sight so bright it could reportedly be seen from miles away, symbolizing America's electrifying future. The Festival Hall. This featured the world's largest organ at the time, a massive instrument with over 10,000 pipes that required two 20-horsepower blowers to operate. For the average American farmer who had traveled days by train to get there, walking into the fair was like stepping onto another planet. Chapter 2. The Birth of the American Diet. If you've ever eaten a hot dog at a baseball game or grabbed an ice cream cone on a summer day, you are participating in the legacy of 1904. The fair was a culinary laboratory that popularized foods that would define the American palate for the next century. The invention of the ice cream cone. Legend has it that an ice cream vendor ran out of clean dishes. Next to his stand was a Syrian waffle maker named Ernest Hamwi, who was selling zalabia, thin, crisp waffles. Hamwi rolled a hot waffle into a cone shape, let it cool, and handed it to the ice cream vendor. The World's Fair cornucopia was born. Iced tea and cotton candy. Iced tea. Richard Bletchenden, a tea commissioner, found that no one wanted to drink hot tea in the sweltering 90-degree St. Louis heat. In desperation, he poured the tea over ice. It became an instant sensation. Fairy floss. Now known as cotton candy, this sponge sugar treat was introduced by William Morrison and John C. Wharton. Despite being a dentist, Morrison helped create the ultimate sugary nightmare that would dominate carnivals forever. Chapter 3. The Dark Side of Anthropology. While the fair celebrated technological progress, it also reflected the deep-seated prejudices of the era. One of the most controversial and haunting aspects of the 1904 fair was the anthropology department, which curated what were essentially human zoos. The fair organizers brought in over 1,100 people from indigenous tribes around the world, including the Igorot from the Philippines, the Ainu from Japan, and various Native American tribes, to live in authentic villages on the fairgrounds. The tragedy of Ota Benga. Perhaps the most heartbreaking story is that of Ota Benga, a Muti man from the Congo. He was purchased by explorer Samuel Werner and brought to the fair to be exhibited as a primitive human. Visitors would poke at him, laugh at his sharpened teeth, a cultural practice, and treat him like an animal. After the fair, his story took an even darker turn when he was briefly exhibited in the Monkey House at the Bronx Zoo. His presence at the fair remains a somber reminder of the scientific racism that was prevalent in the early 20th century. Geronimo's appearance. Even the legendary Apache leader Geronimo was part of the fair. He stayed in a small hut and signed autographs for 25 cents. He later wrote in his autobiography that while he hated being a spectacle, he enjoyed the money he made, which he used to support himself in his final years as a prisoner of war. Chapter 4: The 1904 Olympic Marathon, The Fever Dream. If the fair was a spectacle, the 1904 Olympics, held in conjunction with the exposition, were a disaster. The centerpiece was the marathon, a race so poorly managed that it nearly resulted in several deaths and remains the most bizarre race in history. The conditions. The race was held on August 30th in 90-degree heat with nearly 100% humidity. To make matters worse, the organizer, James Sullivan, wanted to conduct a scientific experiment on purposeful dehydration. He provided only 2 water stations for the entire 26.2-mile course. The roads were unpaved, and as the official cars drove alongside the runners, they kicked up thick clouds of dust that coated the athletes' lungs. The winners and losers. The car ride. Fred Lords was the first to cross the finish line. The crowd cheered as Alice Roosevelt, the president's daughter, prepared to place a wreath on his head. Suddenly, a spectator yelled that Lords had cheated. It turned out he had suffered cramps at mile 9, hitched a ride in a car for 11 miles, and then jogged the last few miles as a prank. The rat poison. The actual winner, Thomas Hicks, was struggling so badly that his trainers decided to give him medicine. They injected him with strychnine, rat poison, and forced him to drink egg whites and brandy. He spent the last 10 miles hallucinating that he was still 20 miles from the finish. He crossed the line supported by his trainers, having lost 8 pounds during the race. He was so close to death that doctors had to treat him immediately. He never ran again. The Cuban mailman. Felix Carvajal, a mailman from Cuba, arrived at the start line in long trousers and a beret. He hadn't eaten for 40 hours. During the race, he stopped in an orchard to eat some apples, which turned out to be rotten. He got stomach cramps, laid down for a nap, woke up, and still managed to finish 4th. The wild dogs. 2 South African runners, Len Townien and Jan Mashiani, the first black Africans to compete in the Olympics, were in the race. Townien was doing well until a pack of aggressive wild dogs chased him nearly a mile off course into a cornfield. The infant incubators. One of the most popular attractions at the fair wasn't a ride or a food stand, it was an exhibit of premature babies. At the time, American hospitals didn't believe in or use incubators, considering premature babies weak and destined to die. Dr. Martin Cooney was barred from hospitals, so he took his technology to the World's Fair. He charged visitors 25 cents to walk through a nursery where tiny babies were kept in glass boxes. The money from the admissions paid for the nurses, the equipment, and the baby's care. Despite the sideshow nature of the exhibit, Dr. Cooney saved thousands of lives. Many of the graduates of the 1904 incubator exhibit grew up to lead healthy lives, proving that what was once a curiosity was actually life-saving science. Chapter 6: Legacy and Dust. When the fair ended in December 1904, the Ivory City was largely demolished. The beautiful palaces, made of temporary materials, were smashed to bits. The only major structure that remains today is the St. Louis Art Museum, which served as the Palace of Fine Arts. The fair left a permanent mark on the American psyche. Consumerism. It taught Americans to want the new, from private automobiles to the latest household appliances. Labor laws. The outcry over the treatment of workers and the Olympic athletes helped spark a conversation about safety and human rights in the workplace. Global identity. It signaled to the world that the United States was no longer a collection of colonies, but a global superpower ready to lead the 20th century.